Welcome to The Reader's Couch, a podcast that brings you lively conversations with some of your favourite authors and bookish personalities. Over here, the couch is always booked, but I've moved some books to the side table and fluffed some cushions so I can welcome a guest or two to come lounge with us. And in today's episode, I'll be talking about the books that made the Minimalist Reads List from the 2022 Biblio Lifestyle Summer Reading Guide. It's official, summer is finally here, at least according to the calendar, and the Summer Reading Guide has been out now for over 3 weeks. So it's fair to say I've been feeling the summer reading vibes for quite some time now. But before I get into the books that made the Minimalist List, I want to tell you a little bit more about this year's Summer Reading Guide. So the 2022 Biblio Lifestyle Summer Reading Guide has 30 new releases organised across 8 categories. So you can head straight to your favourite section or genre if you prefer. Also in the guide, you'll find some fun and easy recipes, things to do this summer season, along with some tips to help improve your reading life. But in addition to reading books to select my favourites for the Summer Reading Guide, which quite honestly I spent most of my time doing, what I really enjoy, and this is something I do with my family, is coming up with the design for each reading guide's cover. Now, this has been something new and something I've been enjoying doing over the past year. Now, it all started last summer in 2021 when I hired an artist to work on the cover illustration for last year's guide. Her name is Lauren, and we've been working together ever since that first guide last year. But this year, the vibe I was going for the 2022 Summer Reading Guide was reading on a boardwalk near the coast. So in the design, you'll find a bookshop, surf shop, an ice cream shop, and of course, everyone depicted on the guide is reading. We have folks laying out on the beach reading too. We have an animal, if you pay attention, that's depicted with his books as well. But anyway, this is something I came up with my family, and of course, Lauren brought this beautiful design to life. So in addition to reading books, I'm now finding fun in designing the covers for the guide. But if you're hearing about the Summer Reading Guide for the first time, or if you've just been busy and it just missed you, if you haven't downloaded your copy yet, first of all, it's free. So you can head on over to bibliolifestyle.com. That's BIBLIO lifestyle.com. And you can download your free copy and see the books that made the list. I'll also include a link in the show notes so you can click through and sign up right there. Okay, now let's get into the books. Now I'm really excited to talk about the books that made the Minimalist Reads List for the 2022 Summer Reading Guide. Now, first and foremost, I want to say the entire guide has 30 books. There are 30 new releases, they're organized across 8 categories. But I'm well aware that for some readers, reading 30 books over a 3-month period might not be possible. So what I have done is selected one book from each category and put them together for the Minimalist List. So if you really want to read the best books of the season, I highly recommend you pick up 1, 2, or all the books from this list. So what are they? Let's get into it. So the first book I'll be sharing with you is from our literary fiction list. Now, in the Summer Reading Guide, I selected 6 books in the literary fiction category. But the book I selected for the Minimalist Reads List is Nightcrawling by Leila Motley. After selecting this book for the guide, I was so pleased to see that this was also selected for the Oprah's Book Club selection. So all through June, readers will be reading Nightcrawling with Oprah as well. Now, the short summary for Nightcrawling is that in the novel we meet 2 black siblings from a fractured family who are scraping by. We see the desperation to survive, but we also see how they thrive amidst loss and a sex trafficking scandal. Now, this is a heavier book, and there are some heavier themes, and it might be triggering for some readers. So one, I highly recommend you plug this book's title into your favorite reading app and review some of the trigger warnings associated with it. An app I use to kind of check trigger warnings is the Story Graph. So I highly recommend you doing that before reading this book. But I'm super excited about it. I think it's a very important read, and what better time to get through a heavier book than the summertime. Now, in Nightcrawling by Leila Motley, we meet 17-year-old Kiara, and this is a character I've grown extremely fond of while reading. I also wanted to give her a hug, and also to let her know that everything will eventually in time be okay. So we meet Kiara and her older brother Marcus, and they have been on their own since their mother went to jail. But when their landlord raises the rent on their apartment, Kiara grows desperate, and unfortunately her brother Marcus is no help. He's busy chasing his dreams of becoming a hip-hop star, and as a result he's not able to hold down a job. So Kiara drops out of school and she's hunting for work to pay their rent, but she's also trying to keep a boy who's abandoned and living next door safe and fed. Now, one night, what begins as a drunken misunderstanding with a stranger turns into the job Kiara never imagined wanting, but now she desperately needs, and that's nightcrawling. At first, she tells herself she will do sex work to just get enough to pay the rent and buy groceries for her and the abandoned boy next door. But soon, Kiara is caught up in a sex trafficking ring servicing the Oakland Police Department, and her world collapses when this scandal goes public, and her name surfaces in an investigation that exposes her as a key witness. Now, the author, Leila Motley, I think she did an amazing job chronicling Kiara's desperation and also her bravery. I also felt a great sense of determination with Kiara and her desire to move forward despite just everything that was happening around her, just all the losses that were affecting her family as well as the people around her and everyone that she knows. But also I want to say that while this book is heavier, there were moments of beauty that shone through. I really enjoyed reading them tagging an underpass wall with spray paint, Kiara learning to swim, although in a dirty pool, and her finding shelter in the arms of a friend. I mean, those bits were also important as well. So, if for nothing else, I think this book is just a powerful testament to the resilience of Black women. And again, this is just a very powerful and important read. I think what's also mind-blowing to me is just how young the author is, and the fact that, she was able to tell this story in just a very poetic kind of way. I think she really has a great way with words, and I'm also blown away that this is a debut. Now, if you read There There by Tommy Orange or Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn Ward, then Nightcrawling is definitely a book for you. And even if you haven't read those books, again, I'm still encouraging you to give this book a try. I consider it a challenge, picking up the books from the Minimalist Reads List. So, the first one is Nightcrawling by Leila Motley. Okay, the second book on the list is in the historical fiction category, and in the summer reading guide, I selected 3 books for this one. Now, for me, historical fiction tends to be really saturated with World War II stories, and don't get me wrong, I absolutely love them. But on occasion, I really enjoy when I can read something that is either genre-bending or from a different time. For our Minimalist Reads List, I selected a book that is more of a reimagining than actual hardcore traditional historical fiction. So, this one might be a challenge to traditional historical fiction readers as well. So the book I selected is briefly A Delicious Life by Nell Stevens. Now, some of you might be familiar with the author Nell Stevens. She wrote the memoir Bleaker House, and then she also wrote The Victorian and the Romantic. So this is her fiction debut. And like I mentioned, this is more of a reimagining than anything else. So in briefly A Delicious Life, it reimagines French writer George Sand and Polish composer Frédéric Chopin's Winter in Mallorca in 1838. And it also ties in the 15th century ghost that haunts their holiday house. So in the novel, we meet a girl called Bianca. She died at the age of 14 in 1473, and she's been haunting the Charterhouse, a place that used to be a monastery, for many years. Now, during her time there, she has never met a fellow ghost. And the monks she used to torment, they're now long gone. But out of the blue, new tenants arrived to the Charterhouse. It's French writer George Sand and Polish composer Frédéric Chopin, her lover. Also accompanying them are her 2 children and a servant girl. Now, Sand draws the attention of Bianca, and Bianca is a ghost. And in the novel, what unfolds is a story of unrequited longing and just the impossible love of a teenage ghost for a woman who can't see her and doesn't even know she exists. So you're probably wondering, why did I put this in historical fiction? I understand it's a bit genre bending, but this does explore a historical footnote and it expands on it. So I've been selling it as a book. It expands and explores a historical footnote while also diving into queer life and life after death. So this one's a reimagining, again, not traditional, but I hope you'll give it a go. I think this book would be really good for readers who read and enjoyed Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, because I really got similar vibes where you reimagine an important historical footnote. So again, this one's entitled Briefly, A Delicious Life by Nell Stevens. Okay, so the third book on the list is a book with themes of family and friendship. And in the summer reading guide, I selected 3 books in this category. But for our minimalist list, the book I selected was Fellowship Point by Alice Elliott. Now, when you see this book on a bookshelf or when it arrives in the mail, the first thing that will come to mind is, oh my gosh, this is a beast of a book. And it is. It comes in at almost 600 pages, but I promise you, it's one of those novels that will keep you turning the pages, and it's one of those books you won't want to end. Now, in Fellowship Point by Alice Elliott, the friendship of 2 women is tested when they need to decide about the piece of coastal property that they own, they need to decide what to do with it, and as a result, long-buried memories and secrets come to life. In the novel, we meet 2 women who are later along in life. And I really enjoyed that because sometimes I feel fiction tends to focus on the 20 and 30-somethings, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I just really enjoyed reading a book about someone in their 80s. I really did. I found it extremely refreshing. So in the novel, we meet Agnes Lee. She's an 80-year-old woman, and following her 3rd breast cancer diagnosis, she's thinking about her life and her legacy and just everything that she'll leave behind. Agnes also happens to be a celebrated children's book author, but she also secretly publishes a literary series for adults as well. But she writes those books under a pseudonym. Now, the 5th volume in her series is due, but she's experiencing some really bad writer's block. At the same time, Agnes is planning to donate a valuable stretch of land that she owns along the Maine coast with her best friend Polly. Now, she's been lifelong friends with Polly, and this is also something I really enjoy reading, is lifelong friendships, especially those amongst women, because I really believe friendships amongst women are some of the most important relationships we can have in our lives. So Agnes is considering donating this land, but she owns it jointly with her friend Polly. Now, Polly, on the other hand, has led a completely different life than Agnes. She's a well-off married woman, she has children, and she's completely devoted to her husband. And she's one of those women who strive to create balance in their life and beauty and harmony at all times. Agnes, on the other hand, has no children, and she finds herself at opposite sides with Polly when it comes to deciding what to do with the land that they both own. Polly herself finds that her loyalties are being torn because she wants to honour the wishes of her best friend, but she also wants to honour the wishes of her 3 sons. But the real question I feel at the heart of the novel, especially where Polly is concerned, is what is it that Polly really wants? But if that isn't enough, Agnes and Polly have other problems too, and each of them are kind of being held back in their lives based on choices they've made in the past, and some of those decisions might come to light because Agnes has a nosy editor in New York, and this editor is really determined to make Agnes write a memoir. And by basically writing this, she'll be revealing some things about herself and her life and her friendship, and all of these things will come to a head. So again, this book is a beast, but it's a page turner. And if you love books about family and friendship, especially female friendship, if you're looking for something different that, centers characters who are later on in life, I really recommend you give this one a go. For comparisons, I would say if you read The Nest by Cynthia Dupree Sweeney, or Ask Again Yes by Mary Beth Keane. But if you read those books and you really enjoyed them, I highly recommend you give Fellowship Point by Alice Elliott a go. And even if you haven't, I just think this is such a good book that is worth the read. So I really hope you give it a chance. Okay, next on the list is my non-fiction selection, and for non-fiction books I selected 3 books for the summer reading guide, but for our Minimalist Reads List I selected We Carry Their Bones by Erin Kimmerdale. Now this is a book that is an investigative piece, and it did an investigation into a corrupt Florida reform school called the Dozier Boys School. That was the institution at the heart of Colson Whitehead's novel, The Nickel Boys. So without saying, if you read The Nickel Boys, then you definitely need to read We Carry Their Bones by Erin Kimmerdale, because this tells the true story. And not only does it investigate the actual boys' school, but it also chronicles the journey and the contentious process of reuniting the boys with their families through forensic and DNA testing. Now, this school began in the 1900s, and it housed thousands of young men who were sentenced for presumed crimes. And these boys were at the mercy of their jailers and also a Jim Crow system of injustice. Now, unfortunately, many of the boys died there, and they were buried in forgotten graves. But in the wake of the school's shutdown, the author of the book, Erin Kimmerdale, who is also a forensic anthropologist, she set to work to identifying the young men through their remains. And through doing this, she also unveils a corrupt and racist system that just swept up these boys, most of whom were black. So this was just a really unfortunate situation all around. She really dives deep into the injustice of it all, but also just how contentious it was, even at the end, to try and reunite these boys with their families. I think this is also another important book. It's something worth reading. Again, if you read The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead, without a doubt, I highly recommend you reading this true story, this true investigation, and just what it was like trying to identify these boys and reuniting these boys with their family. And even if you never read Nickel Boys, I think it's still worth reading. It's very important, and it's definitely a part of history. So again, this book is entitled We Carry Their Bones by Erin Kimmerdale. Okay, 4 books down, 4 more to go. We're at the halfway point. So the next book on my list is a book I selected for my science fiction, fantasy and horror category. Now in the guide I selected 3 books, but the book I selected for the Minimalist Reads List is Dark Earth by Rebecca Stott. So the long and short of Dark Earth is that this novel was set in 500 AD, and it's steeped in myth and folklore, and it follows 2 sisters who face enslavement, but they discover a community of rebel women that makes everything going on worth fighting for. Now, this is a very feminist kind of novel filled with history and magic. And again, like I said earlier, this book is set in 500 AD, and this is when the Romans have abandoned Britain. And we meet sisters Isla and Blue, who live with their father, who's known as the Great Smith, because he forges rare ceremonial swords. But unfortunately, this family are feared to bring bad luck because the Great Smith has this, magical metal working skill. His daughter Isla has differently coloured eyes. Blue has psychic gifts. So again, just overall, they're seen as bad luck. So they're exiled to a tiny island on the Thames. But when the Great Smith dies unexpectedly, when their father dies, Blue and Isla have to find safety. But what happens is they end up fleeing retribution when it's discovered that Isla has defied sacred law and has actually entered a forge, because back then women could not enter a forge to make swords because it would result in them possibly being cursed. So they end up now running away in exile. But what happens is they discover an underworld of rebel women who are living secretly amid the ruins. But if they are to survive the men who hunt them, while also protecting their new community, they're going to have to use all their skills, all their ingenuity, as well as their magic to fight back. So again, this is a book set in 500 AD, steeped in myth and folklore. It's a very feminist tale filled with lots of magic and history. The first book I thought of for a good comparison, because I really enjoyed this one, was The Lost Queen by Signe Pike. I adored that book. So if you read that book and you loved it, then Dark Earth by Rebecca Stott is just for you. But again, you don't have to read the books that I'm comparing them to. Just give them a try. And I think this is a really good one. It magic, history, feminism. So again, Dark Earth by Rebecca Stott. All right, so the next category is mysteries and thrillers, and this is the biggest category in summer. Everyone gravitates to, psychological thrillers, mysteries and suspense during the summer. They're great beach reads, you're flying through the pages. And this one, just in case you're not going anywhere, which is totally fine, you will be going on an armchair adventure with this one. I found that even though it's a mystery and a thriller, it was very immersive. I think the author did an amazing job creating the setting for this book, because I felt like I was on vacation. So I highly recommend it. Plus, it's twisty and it was tightly plotted, I feel. So it's a winner in my book. So for this category in the reading guide, I selected 6 books. So there's 6 mysteries and thrillers in the summer reading guide. But for the Minimalist Reads List, I selected The Last to Vanish by Megan Miranda. Now, I'm sure you've probably heard of Megan Miranda. She's a very well-known author. You might know her from books Such a Quiet Place, All the Missing Girls, The Perfect Stranger, The Last House Guest, and The Girl from Widow Hills. So it's fair to say, she is a name in the mysteries and thriller genre. Well, in her latest, The Last to Vanish, which is a book I'm recommending, a journalist investigating disappearances in a small town goes missing. And when that happens, tensions start to rise when the town's secrets are threatened to be revealed. Now, this is a mystery and a thriller, so I can't say much, but what I will say is the novel is set in a cozy upscale resort nestled in the North Carolina mountains. And these mountains and this town is known for rafting and hiking and access to the Appalachian Trail. So again, this felt like a really fun holiday in terms of place and setting. It's somewhere you want to go on vacation. But here's the thing with this town. It has a string of mysterious disappearances. Now, in the book, we meet Abby Lovett, and she's been the manager of this upscale Passage Inn resort for the past 10 years. Now, Abby, even though she's kind of new-ish to town, and I know what you're thinking, like 10 years is a while, she's not new to town, but she's still treated as an outsider by the local folks. And she's been there for 10 years, and she's never been frightened by any of the disappearances. But the town, unfortunately, gets thrust into the spotlight again when a journalist named Landon West comes to the town to investigate and write about the missing persons from that town. But then he vanishes himself. 4 months later, we meet Landon's brother. His name is Trey, and he comes to town determined to get some answers. But the townspeople aren't happy about it. And it makes Abby feel more like an outsider because she's constantly left out of the conversation. And it gets even worse when Abby discovers a key piece of evidence. And that's when the tensions in the town start to rise. So again, it's a thriller, it's a mystery novel. I can't say much, but what I will say is, again, outside of it being a thriller, I love the descriptions of the town. I loved reading about all the activities, the hiking and the rafting. But I also loved, and this is very important in a mystery and a thriller, you could feel the dread in this novel, and it was just very tightly plotted. So I really enjoyed this one. So if you're looking for an entertaining thriller that will transport you to a vacation destination, do some armchair traveling or armchair vacationing, if that's even a thing, then this is the book for you. And again, it's The Last to Vanish by Megan Miranda. Okay, 2 books left. And next up is my young adult fiction selection. So for young adult fiction, I selected 3 books in this category. And the book I'm recommending for the Minimalist list is Kings of Be More by R. Eric Thomas. Now, you might recognize the name R. Eric Thomas because he's a best-selling author of Here for It. Well, in Kings of Be More, we meet 2 16-year-old queer best friends, and they are spending their last days together, having memorable experiences across Baltimore while keeping their protective parents off their trail. So, in the novel, we meet Harrison, and when his best friend, Linus, tells him that he's moving away from their Baltimore hometown and he's moving to South Carolina, Linus himself wants a clean break. But Harrison is all about the theatrics, and he is inspired by the film Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and he decides to surprise Linus with a day full of memorable experiences across Baltimore, while also managing to keep their parents off their trail. But of course, their adventures hit a few snags. They were almost seen by family members, they had run-ins with some new friends. But throughout their day together in Baltimore, some complicated feelings come to the surface. There's some family drama. The boys have to confront some fears. But also, above all, one of the scariest things I think these boys had to confront was obviously saying goodbye to someone you love. And overall, The Kings of Be More is just a tender-hearted story of 2 queer black boys discovering themselves. And I thought it was just a beautiful celebration of friendship. So when reading this book and kind of really thinking about comps, the book I thought about the most was The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. Another book I thought about as well is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. So if you read either of those books and you love them, then I highly recommend you pick up The Kings of Be More by R. Eric Thomas. Okay, so the last category on the list is romance. And in the romance category in the guide, I selected 3 books, and I loved every single one of those books. They were absolutely amazing. But the book I selected for the Minimalist Reads List is A Proposal They Can't Refuse by Natalie Kana. So the short summary for this one is determined to outwit their grandfathers, a Puerto Rican chef and an Irish-American whiskey distiller fake an engagement. But then feelings bubble up between them. Because of course it's a romance and feelings are going to bubble because there's food and whiskey involved. I'm not funny and I'm just kidding. But anyway, this is a fake relationship, fake engagement meets enemies to lovers rom-com. So in the novel, we meet Camila, and she's a chef, and her life revolves around her family's Puerto Rican restaurant. Now, she wants to enter the fall foodie tour to help save her family's restaurant, but convincing her family members is a struggle. Now, her grandfather agrees, but with one condition, that she marries his best friend's grandson, Liam, who she's known since childhood. But also, he happens to be the one man Camila can't stand. Now, Liam has helped his grandfather run the family distillery, and they share a building with Camila's family restaurant. But his grandfather gets in on the setup, and both men threaten to sell the building if the youngsters won't give each other a chance. So to outwit them, Camila and Liam agree to a fake engagement. But what they're unprepared for is how tangled their lives become and the feelings that bubble up between them. So obviously what I loved was the romance, but I also enjoyed the Puerto Rican and Irish culture. I loved reading about their vibrant communities and of course the food, because I just love food in everything. Food on television, food in books, and food in real life. So if you're like me, then definitely give this one a go. I was thinking a lot of You Had Me at Hola by Alexis Daria, but I was also thinking of The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa. So if you've read either of those two books, then definitely give A Proposal They Can't Refuse a go. This is a great book, and I have to say, all 3 romance novels in the guide are absolute standouts. So yeah, that's it for the Minimalist Reads List. 8 books across 8 categories. For literary fiction, I selected Nightcrawling by Leila Motley. For historical fiction, I'm challenging you with Briefly a Delicious Life by Nell Stevens. For books with themes of family and friendship, I'm recommending Fellowship Point by Alice Elliott. My non-fiction pick is We Carry Their Bones by Erin Kimmerdale. For science fiction, fantasy, and horror, I'm recommending Dark Earth by Rebecca Stott. For mysteries and thrillers, I'm recommending The Last to Vanish by Megan Miranda. For young adult fiction, I'm recommending Kings of Beaumont by R. Eric Thomas. And for romance, I'm recommending A Proposal They Can't Refuse by Natalie Kana. I really hope you'll give these 8 books a go, and I know you're listening, so you probably don't have time to jot down these books. So I'm including a link in the show notes where you can click through and find the list of all 8 books from the Minimalist List in one place. You'll also find a list of the books that I compared each title to, just in case you want more recommendations of books to read this summer. I'd love to hear about the books you're reading this summer, so subscribe to the newsletter at bibliolifestyle.com, hit reply to any of my Friday emails or the welcome email and let me know what you're reading, and most importantly, let me know what you're loving. I love hearing the books you've enjoyed reading, because sometimes I get introduced to a new book, and I really enjoy when I get recommendations from you. So again, I hope you have a summer filled with reading. Hopefully some of your favorite books are from the guide, and I can't wait to hear about it. So until next time, happy summer reading. Thank you so much for tuning in to The Reader's Couch. You can find out more about the show and submit your questions for our guest by visiting our website, thereaderscouch.com. You can also connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Couch Is Booked. If you like the show, please subscribe, share, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Next week, I'll be back with new guests, more books, and some fun games we can play. But until then, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.